Fear of the coronavirus has caused parents to cancel their children's doctor's appointments.
Tonight on Your Side's Haley Harrison spoke to a Jacksonville pediatrician who has noticed a dip in patients and worried about First Coast kids because they could be getting behind on their vaccinations.
Gosh, the first couple of weeks, it was down more than 50% of the visits canceled, and people just real nervous about coming to a doctor's office.
Longtime Jacksonville pediatrician Randy Thornton says the COVID-19 pandemic caused many of his patients to miss their annual and vaccination appointments. He explains parents might be worried about the coronavirus, but as or more important is keeping your kids up to date on vaccines that can keep preventable deadly infections like whooping cough or meningitis from spreading.
Kids are falling behind on their vaccines.
Ponte Vedra pediatrician Bonnie White adds there's also concerns of a spike in measles cases and other highly contagious viruses.
The Academy of Pediatrics is very nervous that measles is going to come back. They're having strange viruses in California that look similar to a polio virus, so there's huge concern.
She says when kids start mingling again, safety measures will be as important as ever.
If summer camps and sports camps open this summer, they obviously have to follow the strict precautions that have been recommended. The temperature checks, the good hand washing, possibly the wearing the masks.
In fact, Dr. Thornton even thinks summer camps should make sure participants are up to date on their vaccines.
There is no question other children are at risk of a child who is unvaccinated.
The message from your local pediatricians is simple. Your family's practice might have new procedures in place like temperature checks, but it is safe to bring your children to the office to get vaccines. Haley Harrison, First Coast News, on your side.